The final match day of the 2026 FIFA World Cup qualifiers are upon us. Finally, it's been, I think, a little over 2 years now since they very first started. And there are still 5 places up for grabs. So we're going to preview most of those coming up next on the African Five-Side podcast. Hello, welcome back to another episode of the African Five-Side podcast. I'm Maher Mezahi, and as always, this is brought to you by africasaCountry.com. I'm going to replug the same article that I did last video because today, as I'm recording, it's Sunday, October 12th, and it is election day in Cameroon. So if you're at all interested in the elections in Cameroon, please go to the website. There's an article called Cameroon's Last Election, and it's by Shwimo Trust-Dohe, who I looked up is a guy, and he wrote about it and put it into context. So if you want to read more about the Cameroonian elections, please click on the link in the description below. But if not, if you're just here to talk about football and the World Cup qualifiers in the African zone, then let's do that. And we're really just going to talk about 2 groups. We're going to talk about Group C, where you have Nigeria, Benin, and South Africa chasing qualification. And we're also going to talk about Group D, where you have Cape Verde and Cameroon also chasing qualification. I think those are the most important matches starting between on the 13th and the 14th. So we're going to kick it off with Cape Verde versus Eswatini. And for this one, it's not just going to be me talking. I called my friend Alistair Haworth, who you've seen on this channel before, one of the best African football journalists, in my opinion. And he actually flew to Praia. He flew to Praia in Cape Verde. And he's been there for a few days, and he's going to be there for the match tomorrow. And he's also going to be there after the match. So nobody really better to speak to inform us all of what's happening in Cabo Verde than him. So please listen to our conversation as we preview the match of Cape Verde versus Eswatini. Alistair, you are in Praia in Cape Verde. What's the atmosphere like at the moment? It seems like from the outside that it would be bubbling, that everybody would be extremely excited as we're on the verge of Cape Verde being the second smallest team to ever qualify for a World Cup. What's it like on the ground in reality?
To be honest, man, it's a bit strange because everyone is so excited, everyone is so pumped, and like this is a football mad country, like everyone is wearing football shirts, everyone, Benfica fans and Porto fans and supports like a team here, and so it's a hugely football mad country, and everyone is so excited. As I've spoken to someone yesterday who said this will be the biggest event since independence 50 years ago. But you wouldn't know if you were just walking along the streets. Like, and it's such an interesting kind of cultural insight to folks here. They're so calm, they're so relaxed, like, and there's this whole mentality of like, once things happen, we get excited. Once things happen, we'll get going. But yeah, you see people wearing the kits, wearing flags, hanging everywhere, and there is excitement. But even in the first game against Libya, I was here watching the game in this central square in Praia, and we spent like 2 hours trying to find somewhere where there was like a good atmosphere and there was loads of fans and we just couldn't. And everywhere we went, it was like even up to like 20 minutes before kickoff, people would be like, "The game hasn't started yet." Why would we be getting ready? The game hasn't started yet. And it's just this like strong, the kind of tagline of Cabo Verde is this Creole word morabeza, which is kind of like warmth and hospitality and relaxedness, and kind of their English, slogan, which you see everywhere here is no stress, no stress. Even on the back of football kits, you'll just see no stress. So it's very chill. And I also want to point out today is Sunday, and Cabo Verdeans take their Sabbath very, very seriously. So not even grocery shops are open, like nothing is open. Everyone is just relaxed, everyone is chilling. But everyone you speak to is saying, come tomorrow, things will be crazy, and I think they will be. And a good example of that was like the ticket office that we went to like look at, and there were people queuing there from like 6 a.m. and the tickets didn't even open until I think it was 10 or 11. You had people there for like 6, 7, 8 hours trying to get tickets, and that's where you kind of saw the real passion. And I think you'll see that tomorrow. But actually, it's the calm before the storm.
So you're an African football journalist. I'm an African football journalist. This is a dominant, headline internationally. And a lot of times people say, like, where did this come from? Like, how did this tiny nation sort of qualify? And we know that they've been sort of relevant in African football since they qualified for the AFCON back in 2013. What I mean, usually we put it down to the diaspora. You know, they can rely on players born in Portugal or in the Netherlands. Is that really it? Is there something else bubbling beneath the surface? What do you have you learned anything else about that?
Yeah, I think that's a huge part of it. I think prior to like the 2000s, they didn't really have anyone from abroad, from the diaspora, and then kind of I think it was really starting in like 2010 that they started to bring in players from the diaspora, and that has been a huge boon. They can't, you can't deny that. That's been a huge aspect to it. But there are a significant amount of the players who actually, played professionally in Cape Verde before going. Vozinha, their, legendary goalkeeper, players like Kevin Pina, Stopira, like these guys have, so a lot of them have come from Cape Verde. What I would say is the big game changer in terms of what has happened, because I think we kind of separate their success in two spheres, right? Is you have that 2013, 2014 qualification to the World Cup where they almost got it. They beat Tunisia, but then were disqualified. And then 2015 AFCON. They then don't qualify again until 2021. And now this is kind of that new generation. There's only really, like we were talking before off air, I think Ryan mentioned Vozinha, who've been part of both of those generations. But I think what we've seen is the like professionalization off the field, and I think that's where you've really seen things change here. We've spoken to a couple of the vice presidents of the federation and journalists around, and there has been a lot of investment. I think they spent about 8 million euros from FIFA Forward Fund in investing in training centers. I think they have three across the country. I think two on Santiago, the main island, and one on Mindelo, I think, one of the other islands. So there has been huge investment relative to what Cabo Verde have done, and I think what they've done is they've spent their money really well. So a good example is coming into this FIFA World Cup qualification. Cape Verde actually approached FIFA, and they said, "Look, we want to qualify for the World Cup. We think it's possible. Can you help us?" And so actually FIFA gave them some technical support in terms of helping them with that professionalization, with the management, with the logistics, because there's only seven full-time employed people at the federation. It's not a big federation, you know.
Wow, wow,
Yeah,
wow.
it's crazy. But as part of that is they actually applied to the FIFA Forward Fund to get funding to help with things like costs of travel, because Cape Verde is not a rich country, and it is very expensive for them to travel. I think for the Libya game to travel to Libya and then back here, it cost them almost $400,000. And for a country like Cape Verde, that's just not accessible. But because they've worked with FIFA, actually FIFA have covered a lot of those costs. So I think that has kind of brought about a level of standards and professionalization. When you speak to some of the guys who have been there for a long time, that's what they say. They say, look, 2010 I think it was 2010 we went to an away game in Tanzania straight off the plane. We're in Benjamin Mkapa Stadium, and of course we lose. Like there's no structure around it. Whereas now they have a full-time chef that travels with them everywhere they go. They have they use their own company to do all their logistics when traveling across the continent. So I think while yes, the diaspora players have obviously been the quality that has brought about the success, I think it really is actually the off-field stuff, the structures they put in place. And, they've really worked for this. This isn't a fluke. They've done things well, they've done things right.
So the last time we were really paying attention to them was at the AFCON, and they were very impressive. I think wouldn't perhaps be an exaggeration to say they played some of the best football in that tournament. Very technical side. And then after the AFCON, they had to qualify for the next AFCON, and they sort of fell on their face, right? Um, Hello? Oh, sorry. And they kind of fell on their face. And then they pick up World Cup qualifying and they go on this hot streak. They go on this hot run. They qualify for. Can we explain the sort of Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde effect going on
Yeah.
there? Like, why did they not? Why did they fail to qualify for the AFCON in 2 months?
I think you get different responses when you speak to people here about it. And I think that for a lot of people, the reality is they say we put all our eggs in the World Cup basket. And actually just doing a mini AFCON, because the AFCON qualification was this weird like 3 months, 6 games, like, we just bashing it out of the way because it was so rushed. Whereas the World Cup qualifiers have been going on for over 2 years now. I think there's an element of they weren't able to prioritize. And then speaking with, say, for instance, the vice president, Paulo Santos, he was saying that because they didn't have access to these FIFA funds for the AFCON qualifiers, suddenly their travel plans were a lot more difficult. And I think particularly that key game against Botswana, which they lost, and it really was just those two games against Botswana that they lost. If they'd won both of those, even won and drawn one, they would have qualified. But I think they're saying in the away game, they didn't travel well. they didn't have the logistics on the ground to support them. And then I think there were some issues about training. So they arrived the day before the game, but then the lights went off in the stadium in Gaborone, so they weren't able to train. So they actually played that game without any training. Classic kind of traveling nonsense. So I think there's an element of that is they weren't able to have the kind of same level of structures and support that they normally would or they have had at the World Cup. And part of that is the FIFA funds. But I think when you speak to a lot of people, there is almost an element of this has just been too much trying to do both like World Cup and AFCON qualifiers at the same time in terms of the preparing for it. Because what you've also got to remember is they've got a training team, I think, of 5 people, and they've got Bubista, who's the head coach, obviously, but he doesn't even live in Praia. He lives in, I think, São Vicente, a different island. Then you have one guy in Angola, and then 3 guys in Portugal. Well, I think it's two, but I think they're trying to add a third. But I think they're so th these guys are trying to organize everything when there's not like games going on, and I think just tr preparing for an AFCON in the midst of a World Cup qualifier, I think it was just a bit too much. But I think it was fine margins because yeah, like I said, it's 1-0 losses against Botswana home and away. If they win and draw one of those they do qualify. But it's a weird kind of black mark on their otherwise spotless record in the last what 3 4 years.
So let's sort of shift gears and look at this match against Eswatini. I mean, on the face of it, this is a match that they should win, I think, fairly comfortably, right? Eswatini had a pretty good result a few days ago, drawing with Angola in a match that they were up 2-0, and Angola came back with 2 late goals. It was their coach's debut, though, Patrice Baumel, so maybe we could say that they were not, quite fully in the full swing of things. Um, but what's any like preview about this match at all? Like, is there any hints of maybe uh the mentality going into it? Is it going to be the same? I'm assuming it's going to be the same old 4-3-3, the same old players. What are your thoughts on the match coming up?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, if they don't, if to be honest, if they don't win it, it will be a huge failure. I think I was looking at Eswatini's record. I don't think they've beaten a team in competitive senior football since 2016 that wasn't Somalia. So,
Or
this is the kind
Somalia.
because they beat Somalia 3 times, I think. They played them in both like AFCON prelimination or whatever preliminary qualifiers. So they haven't done so yeah, so it's 9 years since they last won a competitive game against someone that wasn't Somalia. So they should win this game. And I think when you speak to people here, I think there was a difference in tone ahead of that Libya game. Speaking to some of the players, there was a sense like we're confident, but we know this is going to be a tough game. We know that Libya is a
Even me and you,
difficult
we spoke and we said we're not expecting them to win this one in particular,
yeah,
right?
exactly, exactly. And yeah, like you said, if anyone who kind of keeps up with Libyan football, we know it's a tough, tough place to go. Whether or not there's shenanigans going on at the airport or not. But interesting side note is the one of the backroom staff was saying that they always now make sure they've got a backup bus in case there isn't one provided by the local country. But yeah, I think when speaking to the players that, we were at the team hotel yesterday, and again, what you're struck by the players here and in the Cape Verde just culture is everyone is so relaxed. Like we went to me and our friend Alex went to interview Pico, the center back, and when we walk into the hotel, there's Vozinha is there meeting with one of his young relatives, giving him a football ticket. Then there was I can't remember who the other player was, but he was with his grandfather who had come to visit him, and they were just sitting just having tea or something in the lobby. And there's just this incredibly relaxed atmosphere. And Pico was talking a little bit about it. He's saying like, in Europe, ahead of a big game, everyone is locked in. Everyone is, you're wearing headphones, you're by yourself, you're focusing. And he said here in Cabo Verde, everyone's families are just milling about. They're in the hotel, they're having a nice time. And I think it goes to speak towards that kind of relaxed nature of the team. In terms of like the squad, I think yeah, it'll be the 4-3-3. I think we kind of know the back five really and probably the midfield as well. Maybe there'll be one or two changes up front because the front three did struggle, I think, particularly Livramento and Humberto in the last game. But I think we should be expecting a very similar kind of style of play.
I think that's gonna be it. I mean, like, do you guys have any post-match plans? Do you know if there's like a parade that's gonna happen? Are you guys leaving right after the match or
Now we'll be there. We'll be there for another couple days actually, just the way the flights work out. So it'll be and everyone, and I'm sure you could kind of believe this after seeing the scenes after the Cameroon game. Everyone has said, as soon as we win, we are gonna go nuts.
Going
This is
right.
gonna be
No
crazy.
stress
And
until the 90th minute. Yeah.
exactly until that happens. So we'll see. There we're trying to see if we can, spend some time with the players afterwards as well, to see if we could kind of get some of their reaction in the hotel and things like that. But we'll see. But either way, I mean, yeah, we kind of haven't really planned anything because I don't think we really can make plans because even before the game, I was speaking to someone at then they were saying, look, make sure you're getting there, 5, 6 hours ahead of kickoff because we've never done this before. We've never had anything on this scale in terms of the population and this city mobilizing since independence. So,
And the
you know,
stadium
there
isn't huge, right? I mean, what's the
just
capacity?
15,000. It's
Yeah.
15,000. It's on the edge of town. So again, classic like, outside of the town African stadium where it's like you have to travel through one road to get there. So I'm expecting us to get to the stadium very early and not leave for a long time afterwards. But then from there we'll see if whatever happens, I think we'll have a great time. Unless Eswatini stop them,
Unless the unless the unthinkable
which would
happens.
be a disaster.
Definitely. All right, Alistair. Thanks for coming on the African Five Side podcast, and we'll speak soon.
So thank you to Alistair for that. And as he, I'm really excited because really is a historic opportunity. We watch football for these kinds of things. And as he meant, we spoke a little bit off air, and we were talking. We said, what else could do this? Like bring a country together, and for people to say, this is going to be like a second independence. I can't think of anything else really. Besides revolutions, besides independence days. What else can bring everybody, unite every single person in the country together and just have this huge party where people are emotional and they're going to remember for the rest of their lives in football. So that's why I'm going to be tuning in, and I hope you do too. Anyways, next we're going to have Cameroon versus Angola. As I mentioned, it is election day in Cameroon. So people and even the players are going to be paying attention to that, which could be a source of distraction. Don't get it twisted. Players are humans too. Players usually, even though they don't express it publicly often, they do have political opinions. They obviously are implicated in what's going on in the country. And these Cameroonian elections are a little bit controversial because Paul Biya, who's 92 years old, who's been in power since 1982, is going to be running once again, which means I don't think he'll be out of power. I think they're 5-year terms in Cameroon, 5 or 7 years. Would be technically 97 years old for the next one. So I hope he lives as long as possible. I hope everybody lives as long as possible. I hope he has great health and everything. But chances are, man, most of us aren't getting to 97 years old. Perhaps Paul Biya will. But anyways, that will be a source of distraction perhaps for Cameroonian players. If Cameroon beat Angola, you avoid all drama. Even if Cape Verde doesn't slip up against Eswatini, Cameroon will be qualifying at least to the continental playoff. So a win and they stay alive. They could perhaps qualify automatically, but if not, then they stay alive. A draw is still okay though, because they have a +9 goal difference. And when you look at the current rankings, you have Burkina Faso, Uganda, and Niger in spots 5, 6, and 7. They all have 12 points. Cameroon has 15 points. So even if they have a draw and the others win, they'll be level on points. But the others have they're nowhere near the goal difference. Cameroon will be +9 if they draw. The others I think are like +3, +4, +2. So they would really have to score a lot of goals to really threaten Cameroon. So I think even a draw would be okay for Cameroon against Angola. Cameroon have no injured players versus Angola. And if you look, they played the first match against Mauritius. They won 2-0. They had benched Brian Mbeumo, Andre Frank Zambo, and Gisa Vincent Abubakar, Denny Namaso, Christian Basogog, because they just wanted to make sure they focus on this particular match against Angola. They were confident enough that their backup team could beat Mauritius, which of course they did 2-0. I expect those players to start this match, particularly Mbeumo, particularly Zambo and Gisa, Abubakar, and then probably one of Namaso or Basogog. So this is going to be a different look Cameroonian side. And, when the players have been thinking, like all week, they know that they're not really going to be concerned by the first match. All week, they know, okay, look, we're going to unleash you guys against Angola. Think about Angola. Don't worry about the first match. Think about Angola. They should be really motivated. They should be really fresh physically. And yeah, so I think that's going to give them an advantage. Angola, remember, they made a coaching change. Patrice Baumel, the former Ivory Coast manager, the former MC of Algiers manager, has been hired, and Pedro Gonçalves, who has been there since 2019, has been fired. And Gonçalves has been there, actually, even maybe before 2019. he was like taking care of the youth sides, the senior side. He was doing some work with the national direction, uh, technical national director. Like it's like we don't really have these positions in English speaking countries, but it's more like an you oversee all national teams within the federation umbrella, from the women to the under 17 to the senior national team, and they try to put in place a philosophy how to do things. They call it the position is called DTN in French, um, and so yeah, in Europe, and so Pedro Gonçalves basically he was the pilot, co-pilot, and air control. He took care of everything. And now you bring in a guy, Patrice Baumel, has more of a narrow remit. His is specifically the senior national team. And in his first match, they tie with Eswatini 2-2. And they were down 2-0. They came back and they equalized 2-2 very late. And he said, I still need to put my philosophy into place. It's a very convenient excuse for anybody in their coaching their first match, but perhaps it's true as well. Still, I think there's no excuse to draw with Eswatini and especially be losing 2-0. Even if it's your first game, even if you've never coached before. I mean, with all due respect to Eswatini, but Angola should be winning that match 9.9 out of 10 times. So yeah, Cameroon, I still think they have a major advantage here because Patrice Baumel is new, because they rested their players in the first match, because Angola are staying. They played Eswatini in Mbaban in Eswatini, Eswatini, and they've stayed there for the last. I think they're traveling today for tomorrow's match. So they've stayed there for a few days. So even the travel schedule, I don't like it. I prefer when you go to the other country and you train there. So I'm expecting them to be not fresh, as physically fresh as Cameroon are. Cameroon obviously have more to play for. The only thing that about Cameroon is they do have that distraction in terms of election. But I do think Cameroon are going to be favored in this match. I think they're going to win. I don't think it's going to be enough because I think Cape Verde is going to beat Eswatini. But I do expect Cameroon to be one of those 4 teams that make it to the continental playoff. South Africa versus Rwanda. Rwanda are okay. South Africa in the previous match against Zimbabwe, they draw 0-0 in Durban, right? Now they were at home last time, but technically it was a away match. This time they're at home for sure, right? Do or die match. They have to win, and they have to hope that Benin do not win as they travel to Nigeria. There's a very good chance, in my opinion, that Benin do not beat Nigeria in Nigeria, particularly as Nigeria are playing for World Cup qualification as well. Still, South Africa has to win against Rwanda. Rwanda have had a pretty decent World Cup qualifying campaign. However, like Lesotho, they seem to be like, and Benin, they're good defensively more than anything else. They've only scored 5 goals in the 9 matches played, but they've only conceded. Let me check this out. Sorry, I thought I had it pulled up. They've only conceded 6. So you see, they're not averaging a goal a game, but they're also not conceding a goal a game. It's more about like 0.5 per game for both. And so their coach is also Adil Amrouche. If you don't, he's an Algerian coach. He's somebody that I've spoken to on the phone before. I don't know very well, but I kind of know. I've watched him coach Botswana. I've watched him coach Tanzania. I've watched him coach Libya. I've watched him coach, I think, Kenya as well. If you know Adil Amrouche, you know that he is very good at setting up a deep block and defending and frustrating you. Particularly with these smaller nations, he does a good job of playing against the bigger nations. So you factor the coach that's in charge, you factor in the record that they have in this qualifying campaign, and immediately I think, you know what, Rwanda are going to come here and they're just going to try to defend and frustrate South Africa. Not necessarily good news for South Africa, because South Africa, in that first match, I thought they struggled to break down Zimbabwe's low block, particularly late in the second half, even though they did have at the very end 1 or 2 clear opportunities to score, hit the post a few times as well. But the first time they hit the post was a shot from outside of the box, and the second time was also in transition. So you have to put that in place. Okay, Rwanda are going to come here and they're probably not going to come here to score. Okay. What does that mean? For me, I thought there was very little urgency from South Africa, particularly in the first half against Zimbabwe. That has to change. I think that they have to go gung-ho from, and when I say gung-ho, again, I don't mean like expend all of your energy and make sure you're like, and so that all of you guys are completely spent by the 60th or 50th minute. I just mean, if you can make a vertical pass instead of a horizontal pass, make a vertical pass instead of a horizontal pass. If you can line up without a double pivot, line up without a double pivot. I don't want to see Teboho Mokoena start alongside Yaya Sitole or start alongside Batuzi Obas in this match. I want to see Talent Mbata start next to Teboho Mokoena, or just play like another attacking midfielder, just go all out, because I really don't think that Rwanda are going to be coming out here. There's also in team news Mbokazi. He's suspended. Of course, he picked up a late red card. Thought it was a little bit harsh, but he needs to control his temper there. I think he was getting very frustrated as the match went on. For me, that's a sign of immaturity, or more specifically, a sign of young age. Thabo Mulaisane has been called up to replace him. And I think it's a good thing that they called him up because he's 26 years old. Everybody else, when you look at it, like they have Malobangwe Koza, I think everybody else is 21 years old or under. Even Mbukazi is young, but everyone else is very, very young at the center half position. So I think it was good to replace him, but that's something that you have to sort of, you hope nobody makes an individual mistake, because South Africa don't have experienced central defenders in the squad. So Hugo Bruce after the match said against Zimbabwe, he said, "Yes, it's true. I think we tried everything today. We didn't have luck. One moment we had the ball on the line saved, one on the post, and actually two on the post. You need a little bit of luck in such games, and we didn't have it on our side." Yes, I agree. You were unlucky, but you also exhibited, in my opinion, a lack of urgency in the first half. That cannot change. So basically, my solution, you're playing against a low block, do not play a double pivot. Make sure that mentally your team understands that they have to score a goal. They have to score as soon as possible. Because once you score, then reluctantly Rwanda are going to come out a little bit more, then it's going to open things up and it's going to be easier to score a second and a third. And then finally, in my opinion, you have to start Lyle Foster again. I didn't think he had a great game against Zimbabwe. I thought he was really good in the September window. But again, against the low block, you want a tall striker. Rwanda are not the tallest, most physical side. Lyle Foster, I think, can be a threat in the air for Bafana Bafana. So I do think South Africa are going to win this match. And finally, we have Nigeria versus Benin. And this is where I think we're going to have time. If you have time to pause the podcast and pull up a calculator, now's the time to do that. Because Nigeria need a win, and they need South Africa to trip up against Rwanda. If Nigeria can just win even 1-0, Nigeria are through if South Africa trip up. If Benin draw, then we talk about goal difference. If Benin draw and South Africa win, then we're talking about goal difference. It depends by how many South Africa beats Rwanda. Another reason why I need a huge amount of urgency. If Benin beat Nigeria in Nigeria, which would be, in my opinion, pretty shocking, in a derby where historically Nigeria have reigned supreme, then Benin are through to the World Cup for the very first time in their country's history, which would be fantastic as well. So to recap, Benin need to win or draw. A win takes them through automatically, a draw, and you have a goal difference duel with South Africa, providing South Africa beat Rwanda. South Africa have to win, basically. If Nigeria beat Benin, even 1-0, they just have to hope that South Africa drops points. They only pick up a draw or they lose, and then Nigeria are through, even with a 1-0 victory. Because it's crazy how far back you have to go in the tiebreakers. Because if Nigeria beats Benin 1-0, then they're going to have the same amount of points with 17. They're going to have the same amount of goal difference. Nigeria will be +4. Benin will be +4 as well. The goals for will be 12 for both of them. Goals against will be 8 for both of them as well. Then you go into goal difference. Once you start going into goal difference, it goes into away goals. Once it goes into away goals, then Nigeria has the advantage, because Nigeria lost away from home 2-1, where they scored an away goal. But if they win 1-0 at home, then obviously Benin will have scored an away goal. So you really have to go to like the 8th category to finally break the tie. I also think if this match finishes 2-1, then you go to yellow cards. So you also have to make sure, if you're both coaches, you have to prepare your teams extensively. Don't be like South Africa. Prepare your teams extensively and tell them, look, you have to play discipline. I haven't counted how many yellow cards Nigeria have compared to Benin, but that could be one that is obviously worth tracking as well. Besides all of the calculations, Gernot Rohr, of course, was the former Nigeria coach. He was fired. He didn't think he deserved to be fired. He thought he did a decent job. He's going to be extremely motivated against Nigeria to make sure he gets a result. And what about on the pitch? On the pitch, Nigeria played a 4-4-2 against Lesotho, right? Thought it was interesting, but I didn't think the midfield was great. I thought it was a pretty hollow midfield. I would personally go with like a 4-3-3 here. Why? Because Ademola Lookman, in my opinion, is better in a 4-3-3. Play him on the left wing close to Osimhen, similar to how we were seeing him play at the AFCON. That's when you got the best out of Lookman and even the best out of Osimhen. Even though Osimhen wasn't scoring goals, their interplay was very, very good. So I would go 4-3-3 with Lookman, Osimhen, and Chukwueze, who came on as a sub and looked very good against Lesotho, and then play with 3 midfielders. I understand when you go 4-4-2 against Lesotho and you say, you know what? They can't hurt us, even if we have a hollow midfield, even if we leave the middle of the pitch wide open for counterattacks, Lesotho can't hurt us. I agree. That's fine. Against Benin can hurt you, and Benin have a very good midfield. So I'll go 4-3-3 with a double pivot. Onyeka and Didi, and then Iwobi at the top of that 4-3-3. In it with a 2-1 formation in midfield. And then it doesn't really matter for the back five, as long as, Stanley Labali is okay mentally, because he made a few pretty bad mistakes at the end of the Lesotho match, and one of them could be very costly, of course, as Lesotho scored a late goal, and goal difference, as we just mentioned, is extremely important. So hopefully Nwabali is okay. I would probably start him again. I think he's been very consistent since the last AFCON. I wouldn't drop him over one match, but yeah, those mistakes were very costly. I think this is a good match for Victor Osimhen. I think he could have a field day against Benin defenders, because the Benin defenders, whether it's Utonji, whether it's Roche, they are good defenders, but they're a bit slow. They're not great in the air. They're just like good, solid, I hate that word, but solid defenders, in that they are in the positions they need to be in. They make the tackles that they should, but they're not exceptional, really. So I think Victor Osimhen will have a huge physical advantage over them. And even historically, Victor Osimhen in his career for Nigeria has scored 3 goals against Benin. So he has a mental advantage over them as well. That said, when I look at Victor Osimhen's goal scoring record with the Super Eagles, I think he hasn't really stepped up in big matches or against big teams. I know at times, for example, that he's led the continent in scoring in World Cup qualifiers, or AFCON qualifiers, I think it was. But look at the goals, look at the teams he scored against, look at the goals he scored. So again, AFCON, he was great. He didn't score goals. So he scored goals. I'm going to read them really quickly. 26 and 41 matches, decent goal scoring record. But starting from the most recent matches going back, Zimbabwe, Rwanda, Benin, Equatorial Guinea, Sao Tome 2 goals, Sierra Leone 2 goals, Cape Verde 2 goals, Central African Republic, Liberia, Lesotho, Sierra Leone. You see a pattern here. We're not talking about the top teams in Africa. We're not talking about a second tier of teams in Africa. This is not Burkina Faso or Mali. We're talking about really pot 3 or pot 4 teams that he's really scoring a lot of his goals against. So if I have one criticism of Victor Osimhen, I've just spent, like 10 minutes praising him. I always praise him because I think he's one of the most fun players to watch, particularly live. I want to see him score either in big matches or against big team. This isn't a big team, Benin. I'd still consider them a pot 3 team, even though they're about to perhaps qualify for the World Cup. But this is a big match, and I need him to score, not just do the things that he always does, which is harry defenders, leave everything out on the pitch. I need him to score here, even if it's just 1-0. So I do think Nigeria are going to beat Benin 1-0. I think South Africa are going to beat Rwanda 1-0. I think South Africa are going to progress, and I think Cape Verde are going to progress. Yeah, we'll leave it there for now, and we'll be recapping all of the qualifiers as soon as they finish on October 14th, 15th. And then once we know who the 9 teams are going to be that are representing the African continent, we'll go and break them down one by one as well. Thanks for keeping it locked in, and we'll speak soon. Peace.